Yo, 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 what's going on, guys? Rhys here from More Than Lifting with the More Than Lifting podcast. Conversations about calisthenics, bodyweight training, gymnastics, all that good stuff. I'm Rhys, personal trainer from the UK and founder of More Than Lifting. And in this episode of the podcast, episode 97, we're talking about strength versus skill training. All right, let's get into it. Oh, first up. So this episode of the podcast brought to you with Onnit Labs, and Onnit, get your hands on some Alpha Brain, guys, because this will literally change your life. Amazing supplements, a nootropic. Basically, it's like Limitless, but without all the side effects. You know, like in that film when Limitless, when he has all the weird side effects and he starts like spinning out and like doing the zoom thing, you know, the camera, crazy. So it's basically like that. It'll give you the craziest dreams you've ever had. It'll give you like an unbelievable amount of like focus, and it'll just help stuff just roll off your tongue. Like you don't have to really think about your words and stuff like that. Although I've been talking for literally as long, it's like almost 1 o'clock now. I've been talking basically all day, so you got to expect me to run out of words at some point or start tripping up on the things I'm saying. But generally speaking, it just helps your brain work better. Vitamin C, your brain, fantastic supplement, highly recommended. Right now, after all that excitement, I'm gonna have a quick swig of my drink. So this episode of the podcast is all about strength versus skill training. So like the kind of pros and cons of each, and the benefits, and like why we need to be doing certain things, and how to kind of swap between them over the course of your cycles, and the best way to integrate them into your workouts, and like basically all about strength and skill training. So first up, strength training is kind of obvious, like the self-explanatory one. It is very simple dynamic movements, working on certain movement patterns generally with calisthenics, although with like weight training you might do like more isolated muscle groups, though I wouldn't recommend it. But I can understand why people do that, and it kind of makes sense. It's just not my personal preference. I'd prefer to work the whole body as like one unit, because I think that's generally better. Although people will disagree with me with that, and that's all right. So strength training is always very simple movements, like things like pull-ups, dips, leg raises, squats, deadlifts, like things like that. Even though they're compound exercises, they are designed to build strength. Okay, whereas a skill exercise, so like skill training, is things like the more advanced calisthenics and gymnastics exercise you see, like front levers, simpler things that rely on strength less, like handstand push-ups, planches, flags, all that kind of stuff. So it isn't just one thing. It's kind of a multitude of things all kind of put together. And the way skills work is that they're not just like strength-based. Although you can have strength-based skills, you can also have like things that are more based on balance or coordination. And basically skill comes down to three things: strength, mobility, and control. And so strength is just one part of the equation to be able to master skills. And mobility is a very, very important one that's often overlooked. And so is control. And control is really the thing that you're working on when you're training skills, because what you're doing is kind of bringing the strength and the mobility together and teaching you, like developing the control over the muscles and over your mobility. So that is kind of a little overview of what strength and skills are. But how do you do it? Like, it's all good just knowing what it is, but how do you actually train skills? How do you actually like fit them into your workouts? Like, when do you do strength? When do you do skills? And everything else that kind of comes with that. So I do have some notes here because I'm trying to be organized with this one. Can you believe it? I don't know where they are already. So strength training, generally you're going to be doing things like hypertrophy, you're going to be doing like power or maximal kind of strength training. So maybe you'll be working within like maybe a 5 or maybe up to like a 12 or a 15 kind of range of reps. But it's going to be very basic exercises. There are loads of variations of stuff you can do. So it's not just like, say you're doing pull-ups and dips and like the foundation tricep, the pulls, dips, and leg raises. You like work the 3 exercises together in a tricep. You can still, as you get better at these, you can start working on more advanced variations. So you can do like close grip pull-ups, you can do wide pull-ups, you can do like bias or archer pull-ups or one arm pull-ups. Even with the dips, you can do like your single bar dips, you can do ring dips, you can do like kind of tuck planche push-up kind of things that are kind of like dips, and you can progress and make everything difficult or more difficult just in the same way that you would do so with skill training or with the weights. But with this, it's always very, very simple stuff. It's basically reps and sets, and it's designed to build strength. Now, with the skill training, it's slightly different because it really depends on what the skill is that you're training. So maybe you're training like a strength-based skill, like a front lever. You'll need to do some kind of rep set kind of format, but then you will also do things like a kind of progressive drop set. You will do things like working exercises or working muscles in different ways that will help build strength in the position that you want to hold for that particular skill. So obviously a front lever is holding yourself horizontal, facing up. So you're like looking at the bar and pulling yourself down, holding yourself flat. You've probably seen stuff like this. If you haven't before, just search it on Instagram or whatever. And training your front lever, you're not just going to do front lever stuff. You're also going to do front lever or similar kind of movements and things that will build strength in the same area. You'll also do stuff that you'll help build control in the same area. So you'll improve muscle activation in your shoulders and your lats to help you actually kind of lever down with your arms. You'll work exercises that will help you develop that straight body in your core, in your hips, like stop your hips sagging and hinging basically, which is one of the big problems people have with their front lever. And it's basically a way of progressing through a skill without, but you could, the thing about doing the skill is you can only do so much at any one time of the hardest level. So at some point you have to be kind of stepping it back and working different elements of the skill in isolation so that you can still train it and progress. Otherwise, you're basically going to have 1 or 2 goes a day or like per session, and then you're going to be too exhausted to do any more. Okay, so I'm going to have another swig of this quickly. So, what else have we got? So, how do you arrange your training to train skills? So, when you start actually training skills, you want to have already done some strength training. So generally speaking, you're not going to be able to just dive in at a front lever or diving at a planche or a handstand. Or actually, handstand's slightly different because it's actually a balance. But still, there's going to be some element of developing these 3 pillars, the mobility, the strength, and the control. So generally speaking, if you want to learn a skill, you need to do a strength cycle first. And that means that when you're doing your strength stuff and when you're doing your skill stuff or any kind of training, you basically split your training up into cycles. So you're not doing the same thing all the time. You're not just doing the same workout. You kind of have a workout, but then you have different workouts every day of the week, or you have alternating workouts throughout the week. And then over the course of like a month or like a 6-week period will be like a bit of a training cycle. And then after that 6-week period, you'll change and you'll actually do a different cycle. And the reason we do this is because we need to include an element of progressive overload, but then we also need to do some element of changing the way that we train to actually have different stimulation in the muscles, because your body just gets, our bodies are too smart and they're too easy to adapt, and we're lazy. Like physically our bodies are lazy. So what we need to do is keep changing stuff and shocking our muscles or shocking our body, training in different ways, stimulating the muscle in different ways to encourage it to grow and to keep you progressing. So having the strength and the skill kind of perspective and splitting them, maybe do a strength cycle first and then you do a skill cycle second. Doing the strength cycle first and a skill cycle second means that you're naturally changing the way that you train every like month or so, meaning that you're not going to plateau at a level because you're just doing the same training over and over and over again. Generally speaking, skill training or like isometrics, which are holds, but you think like front levers, back levers, they're all holds or isometric exercises. Generally speaking, you'll only progress for like 4 weeks or so doing like isometric holds, and then you'll kind of plateau. So after that 4 weeks, your skill training you'll be done with your skill training, and so you'll need to move on to something different to actually change the stimulation that you get in your muscles. So you naturally have like quite a good increase at first with your isometrics. You'll go like bam, up nice and strong, and then after a couple of weeks you'll start to taper off, and by week 4 you'll just plateau. So a skill cycle, will only ever last for about 4 weeks. If you're doing a skill cycle for any longer than that, then you're basically wasting your time. What you'll need to do is change that from isometrics to some kind of dynamic skills if you only want to do skills, or you just switch to a strength cycle. So with a strength cycle, it's basically the same thing. Like strength gains generally taper off after maybe about 6 to 8 weeks instead of the 4 week, but you can also be working you can also finish a bit early and still hit that you're still peaking at that decent trajectory for strength training, instead of just going the extra 2 weeks or whatever just for the sake of it, because we haven't plateaued yet. But that's kind of going to your plateau is like suboptimal, because you always hit that transition and then you get a little bit demoralized, or you just feel like you're flattening out. It gives you more time when your body's a bit more exhausted to risk actually injuring yourself or overexerting yourself in some way. So generally it's safer, and it's just easier to think 1 month at a time. I'm going to do this for a month, then I'm going to do that for a month, and it works a lot better for us because it fits the calendar nicer, and also it gives us time to it stops us from hitting that plateau in the first place, and just helps us continue on without overexerting or risking injury or anything, or just generally getting a bit overexcited and pushing yourself too hard, which is very, very easy to do if you're training. So that's that, I guess. When you first start training, you're going to have to do your strength cycle first, because you're going to lack the strength to do any of the skills quite often anyway. So it's best generally just to start with a strength cycle, whether it's like you're a beginner and you're doing like some kind of beginner foundational program or something. But then you can move on to something more advanced, like aim for your pull-ups, your dips, and your leg raises. And then once you hit that level, kind of that strength cycle will be done, and then you can move on to your skill cycle and move on to more interesting, more complex exercises, or more like physically demanding stuff, without having to just continue doing reps and sets and reps and sets. So you'll just switch up your training completely, do something more interesting, do more coordinated stuff, work your mobility all the time, obviously, because I can almost guarantee that you need to train your mobility, because everyone does. Even me, even like top gymnasts need to train their mobility. So you'd basically need to do some mobility work in some way, shape, or form. So that's that, basically. Another little drink break because I'm talking too fast. So that's splitting through training cycles. But when you're doing your training cycle, you're not just going to do pure strength stuff and pure skill stuff and that's it. Okay, this can also change on a day-to-day basis. So you can do like a strength day and then a skill day, or you can have like, however you split up your week, you can have like strength, legs, something else, skills, blah, 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 high intensity, mobility, and kind of work everything in a week, and that's great. That's a great way to do it. If you haven't get any program off me, you're going to do some form of high intensity kind of cardio situation, you're going to do some kind of mobility training, as well as whatever you're working on, like a strength session, like upper body strength, legs, or whatever, like however we decide to work it out based on your goals. But it's always it's a good idea basically to include all those things, but then you can still have like your strength day where you work on your pull-ups, your dips, and your leg raises. You can also do a skill day where you're like training specifically your handstands, or you're working on dynamic movements for the skills you're working on. So this is more of an advanced thing for strength training, but you could do, say, day 1 and 2, you're doing like your muscle ups, your pulls, and your kind of basic movement pattern strength stuff. And then day 2, maybe you've got your skills. So you actually have like a pure skill day where you do things like your front lever pulls. You can do like planche push-ups. You can do handstand push-up progressions. You can do like other things that are still strength-based. They're dynamic skills, but they're going to help push the needle forward specifically for the skill that you're training. And that's going to help you push the needle forward with a skill, even when you're doing a strength cycle. You're not going to do this on the first strength cycle that you do. You're going to do this after you've done one cycle of like isometric training, but there's still no reason there's no reason you can't be doing that. In fact, I would encourage it. If you're working on your front lever, generally we'll do the strength, we'll get competent at some kind of tuck lever or like an advanced tuck if you can get to that position. We maybe work towards some like dragon flag things, lots of hollow body stuff, probably train some handstands as well, and a bit of planche, because a front lever and a planche like quite good complementary skills. You're like pulling in one like this and the other one you're pushing like that, so they kind of work together quite well. And then when it comes to your second strength cycle, after you've trained the basics of those skills, all we need to do then really is, like, that first skill cycle was conditioning your kind of coordination and understanding where your position is. But when we go into the second strength cycle, we can then start including that in your strength training, so you can start working that skill once you're actually in a cycle where you're just focused on strength. So you kind of understand where you got to be, you understand the positioning and how you need to be holding yourself and training, and then you can turn that into a dynamic exercise like tuck planche push-ups and stuff like that to help move the needle forward for the next the next skill cycle. I'm getting confused between strength and skill, but basically the next skill cycle where you can take whatever your planche or whatever lever state you are at and try and push it to the next progression. So what we haven't covered is how skill training works compared to strength training. Generally with strength, you'll just go, oh, I'm doing pull-ups, now I can do pull-ups, so now make me do wide pull-ups, or make me do chin-ups or L-sit pull-ups or something else to make it a little bit hard, or muscle-ups, Whereas with skills, there are like set progressions that kind of take you through everything. So you'll have your, just go by front lever, for example, because we've been talking about that. You got your tuck front lever, then it goes to an advanced tuck front lever, then it goes to a single leg, then a straddle, then a half lay, and then a full lay. So there's like a 6-stage progression that you need to be going through. You can cheat it a little bit. So sometimes you don't do the half lay, sometimes you avoid the straddle because your hip mobility sucks, although you should be working on it. Sometimes you'll skip, or you'll like kind of breeze past one particular progression because it'll either be easy for you or it'll be too hard. Like one element of it will be too hard, like mobility often, like hip mobility often with a straddle position. So then you'll just completely miss that, or you'll maybe train that a little bit, but you'll try and get to the next stage, or like skip a step to get there, or focus more on a single leg and then focus more on the half lay and try and work through the progressions that way. But generally speaking, you'll just hit all 6 points of these as you learn to actually do any particular lever or any skill like a planche. It's the same with slightly easier exercises or slightly different skills. So like you think like a handstand, for example, although the progressions isn't set out quite the same, like it's not like tuck, advanced tuck, single leg straddle, the way it does work is you'll have like conditioning and like positioning, you'll have your mobility training that you need to do, you'll learn to do a wall support, you'll learn to come off the wall, then you'll learn to kick up by yourself and dismount properly. So there's still like 5 or 6 little things that you need to get before you can just do freestanding handstands. It's just that the order changes and the way you approach it changes. It's a lot more of an individual thing based on how comfortable you are in any position and how quick you are to learn and how often you train and like just what makes sense to you. So handstands are a completely different ballgame because they're not strength based. It's just a totally different situation basically. I'm going to have another little swig of this. So we've covered how you can do like cyclical splits, and we've covered how you can do splits on days, but you can also split your strength and your skill training on within each workout. So sometimes you don't have the time to kind of work out full training programs, or you're kind of doing it yourself, and in which case, what I generally recommend is that you actually just do it all in one day. There's no reason, say you're only training twice a week, there's no reason that you can't still progress at your strength and progress at your skills in just 1 or 2 training sessions a week. You just got to do it smart. So you got to approach it in the right way that will give you the results that you're after. And the easiest way to do that is just have it as one workout. So the one workout kind of template that I've put together, which I've spoken about loads and loads of times, so a lot of people probably already know this who are listening to the podcast. It basically is the hardest stuff first, progressively getting easier throughout the session to simple low-level conditioning stuff, things like, you'd start your workout doing your hardest things like your front levers, generally your skill stuff. Then once you get through your skill stuff, you'll kind of progress or regress onto dynamic stuff, and it'll just be pure strength stuff, simple movement patterns, and it's just about grinding out those reps and sets. This isn't going to be progressing, but what you've done is you've pre-fatigued everything that's weak on your higher level skill, like your front lever. So when it comes to just doing pull-ups and dips and stuff, those muscles are already like screwed, which means they're going to have to work a lot harder just to be able to get through your pull-ups and your dips and stuff, which will just give you a much better result for actually training those skills. So that's the best way of approaching strength and skill training, just in one session. Then after you've done that, so you've done your skills and then you've done your main strength training, then you move on to more kind of lower level conditioning stuff. You're thinking like core work, maybe like a little bit of a Metcon or something, depending on your goals and what you need to help get you down that path to actually achieve that goal. And then finally you'll finish off just with some like nice mobility stuff, nice and relaxing, maybe some rolling, maybe hit the Theragun or something, or just use a bit of a band for some assistance. You can also actually, right at the end of the session is another good time to actually just revisit the skill. So with your front lever, for example, you would do your front lever stuff, like your hardest front lever stuff, then your next hardest progression stuff, and maybe some dynamic things. Then you'll do your pulls and your dips and your leg raises, or like some muscle ups if you're at that kind of level. Then you'll do like some rows and some push-ups or something, move on to like flutter kicks and like crow stands and stuff like that. You can also then, right at the end of your session, test your lever again, like test the hardest thing, test that and see how much more difficult it is. Just do like a single hold as a finisher, like hold to the death. You might not do your hardest progression, like you wouldn't be expected to, obviously, in that time. But what you might want to do is like just focus on doing an advanced tuck for as long as you can. You might want to just do like a regular tuck or something for as long as you physically can actually hold that position, so that you can kind of re-fatigue, like double fatigue everything that's been working. And that's just going to help you kind of solidify that neuromuscular connection, which is going to help you hold the position better. Like, you're not expecting miracles at this point. You're going to do the hardest thing that you can do, but you're looking to just hold for like 10 to even like 20 seconds or something. Just max out as much as possible to get just to finish yourself off and really kind of hit those weaker muscle groups hard. Okay, because a skill isn't just, as we've said, it's not just the strength, it's not just the coordination or the mobility, it's like all of the three things together. So when you do it at the end of your session, you're basically taking out the strength, you're taking out the mobility or whatever, and you're basically just focusing on the coordination and the actual activation of all those muscles together, even when they're a mess. Okay, because it's very easy to do skills when you've got loads of energy. It's very, very hard to do them at the end of your session. With handstands, it's a totally different ball game. Because it's not strength based, doing it at the end of your session is actually very, very beneficial, just for helping to master that coordination in the same way that it would be for a front lever or for a planche or something. But with your handstand, it's completely different because it's pure balance. So you basically have exhausted your muscles, then you're revisiting a balance, like a coordination and control kind of skill. And this is gonna, I sometimes find that this actually is easier. So sometimes at the very start of your workout with handstands, you can really just struggle to get everything working together, and like you're a bit wonky and a bit wobbly, and sometimes it's just tough to stay up. But once you like exhaust the muscles, they can't work too hard against you as well as they can't work too hard for you, but they don't need to work a lot in your favor to be able to do the handstand. So you can kick up, generally you kick up a lot easier because everything's warm and mobile and ready for action, or a bit tired. But then once you're up there, it's a lot easier just to maintain the position, because it's actually easier to hold straight than it is to fight it all the time. And often I find I can hold that a little bit longer than I have been able to do in like a warm-up or in the first part of the workout. Which is a bit of a touch, really. It's nice to just be able to do like a really good handstand just before you go out of a session, because even after you've done like loads of flutter kicks and stuff like that, you're just laying on the ground, you're a sweaty mess and you're exhausted. But then just getting up and like smashing out a nice handstand, or like a one arm, or like, I don't know, like any kind of transitions or whatever you're working on, whatever level it is that you're at, actually then just smashing out a nice handstand like just helps. It's a good way to finish a session, definitely. Right, so we've spoken about cyclical splits, we've spoken about daily splits, and we've spoken about like intra-session or within a session splits. But there are other things about strength and skill training. So there are other ways that you can actually train your strength and your skills. And one of my favorite ways to train strength and skills is actually train them together. So often I'll do like supersets where I'll do a very like hardcore strength exercise and pair it up with like some kind of handstand. So one thing I used to do was like German volume training of like deadlifts or muscle ups, and then have handstands and just work like transitions or just max hold for time. And this is a lot more advanced, so you need to be at a much like higher level to be able to do this, generally speaking, although there are probably like lower level variations you can do. So like I guess you could do like pull-ups and dips and then do like a crow stand for time, or you could do like a wall hold, like a wall supported handstand for time. Something like that would work really well. But I think it's just generally better to do once you're at a certain level and you can actually get like more of a benefit from it. But something like that is a really, really good way of training your skills and your strength together. And they're two completely different forms of training, you know, like doing your like maxing out 10 sets of 10 of like deadlifts or like muscle ups or anything like really, really hardcore like that is exhausting. It completely shags you. And then just on your rest period doing handstands, like just doing like a 20-second hold handstand or something like that, is just gonna give you a bit of time to rest. It's gonna get loads of blood to your brain and stuff like that. It's gonna help you actually rest, but it's teaching you to control, and even when you're absolutely exhausted, force your muscles to work just enough to help build that neuromuscular connection, just as the same way as you would do at the end of a session. But doing it in between is it's another shock. It's another way to like really confuse your muscles and get you to kind of work a little bit harder. And I think that doing that is a great way of like mastering your handstand, or a good way of pairing up exercises together to get a really good like all-round training session without having to worry too much about, I need to do this kind of training, I need to do this kind of training. Just do them together, like do your deadlifts and then do your handstands, like boom, superset, done. You know, you can also introduce core work while you're doing that. You know, there's no reason you couldn't. One thing that I used to do with the deadlifts or with squats is I do like deadlifts or squats, like super heavy, do my set, maybe do like a handstand max hold, like just a single hold, 20-30 seconds, and then do a 30 seconds flutter kicks just on the floor, just straight away, lay down on the ground or roly-poly out, bang, on my back, hands above my head, and flutter kicks. And one of the good things is where like doing this in the gym is that there's generally a clock in view, so you can kind of time yourself through it. Otherwise, just use my watch, just leave the timer running and kind of check it out and use that as a way of actually just tracking and just keeping track of it, so you don't overdo it or don't underdo it, because that's quite common when you're doing flutter kicks, especially when you're doing a tricep with flutter kicks on the end. Like generally you'll be like, oh, just cut that a little bit short, but just having the timer will help keep you in the game as well, so you're not going to give up a little bit early, or you're not going to just go on forever accidentally. Keep it nice and controlled, and then you're in a good position to progress fast, basically. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this. What else have we got on the agenda? Guys, I literally think that is about it. I think we've more or less covered everything. I don't have a lot of questions or anything here today, which is all right. Let's just dive up here quick. Nope. Yeah, so one thing I would say is think about like what kind of level you're at. So think of the kind of level that you're on right now, what kind of skills you're looking to achieve, and what kind of strength stuff you can do. So like think what kind of level of strength you have right now, what exercises, think of the movement patterns that you're working right now, what kind of variations you're on, and then try and work out a way that you can put these together so that you can always be working towards your goal. So what I mean by that is if you're trying to learn handstand push-ups, do dips. Yeah, obviously do dips and do pull-ups, but maybe you could find a way that instead of just doing dips and handstands, or just doing handstand push-up progressions, maybe you can mix these together in a way that you could kind of balance your horizontal and vertical push whilst training your handstand, whilst integrating the kind of skill and exercises that can progress you towards your handstand push-up, like crow stand presses, other handstand presses, handstand negatives, wall-supported handstand push-ups. Things like this that are going to allow you to work the right muscles in the way that we want to be stimulating them to help work that to progress towards that exercise, but without kind of either wasting time, which is a big thing in calisthenics, is people just wasting time on skills that are either too hard for them or too easy. And then think about whether or not they're actually the ones that are pushing you towards your goal. And as long as they are, arrange them in a way, like however it is, but like take what we've spoken about today as a kind of template. Think about how you can do your skills and then progress onto your strength training and then towards the lower level. So you're always working the things that are most important right at the top of your workout. And then as you progress through, you go more and more general until you get to the end where you're like, screw it, let's just do another handstand to see if I can manage one. And what you'll find then over the course of like a month or like your first cycle, and then as you progress onto another training cycle, you'll see your progression and you'll see it actually develop week in, week out. And that's really what you need to be seeing to keep you in the game, so that you're always pushing towards the skills that you're actually trying to achieve, rather than getting distracted or just running off and doing other things, or literally stopping training because you're not seeing the results. Okay, guys, skill and strength training, it can be quite complex, but if you kind of figure out a way to make sure you're just covering all bases, so you're doing some strength training, you're doing some skill stuff, the strength stuff you're doing is helping you get towards your skill, and the skill stuff you're doing isn't too advanced for you and isn't too easy either, then you're always going to be kind of moving the needle forward because you're always doing something that's hard enough for you to actually progress. All right, guys, that's literally it for this episode of the podcast, guys. If you like what you've seen, as always, give us a like, subscribe for more. Leave any questions or comments you got in the box below. Like, reach out to me on Instagram if that's where you're watching. Big shout out to Onnit. Obviously, get your hands on some alpha brains. We're waiting on them bringing back their ketones because the ketones that we're taking at the minute are not nearly as good. But yeah, go to morethanlifting.com/getonnit to get 10% off your Onnit supplements. And they have a bunch of other promotions on their website at the minute as well. Otherwise, guys, you can reach out to me for online coaching, personal training. I've got the handstand course promotion, which is £10 for the first phase of a handstand training program. You should definitely check that out if you're learning to handstand. Otherwise, guys, I will catch up with you in the next one. And as always, keep in touch with yourselves.